I've been talking about AGI for a while, and I personally interpreted it as a bad problem to solve because it wasn't clear. And I want to revise this actually because I came across a presentation by François Chollet. He works, I believe he's with Google or DeepMind. Um, and there was a conference in Seattle. It's the AGI conference, Artificial General Intelligence Conference, and he gave a keynote that I came across actually by chance, and I thought I need to revise my thoughts here because he does exactly what I think needs to be done. He defines it, measures it, and then hopes to develop it. In other words, uh, he actually is working on this problem. He's been working on this for a while. There's a paper. It's all going to be in the show notes, the presentation, the paper, all of these things. So the purpose of this presentation, of this episode, is to talk about the presentation and revise my thoughts on AGI because artificial general intelligence. Um, I think I misunderstood what the community actually tries to achieve. I thought what they're trying to achieve is some sort of super intelligence, something an all-encompassing, I can do anything kind of thing. And to me that was kind of stupid because it's an open-ended problem, so you can't define it and therefore you can't really solve it. But Francois is a lot more humble. I mean, he's not talking about some sort of super intelligence or anything. All he's trying to say is, look, we have kind of two types of intelligence that humans deal with. One is the skill-based intelligence, playing chess, solving math problems, being a good person, getting good grades, singing songs, having, being a good songwriter. Lots of good skills can be translated into intelligence. And I think intuitively we do believe that people like Paul McCartney or LeBron James or Slash or whatever. I mean, people from different fields. Of course, we associate intelligence with academics anyway, but we also believe that, let's say, artists or athletes have intelligence because they have skill. Now, Francois talks about that and kind of tries to divert the attention away from that in a sense that he says, look, it's not really about the skill, right? It's about something else. And that something else is what he's trying to define and measure and then develop. That's the idea of this episode. And I think it's important. I think it gives me a different perspective on what AGI is and also gives me a bit of a perspective on robotics because I think this question of artificial general intelligence, the way Francois defines it, is really, really important for robotics, and here's what he does. He looks at it from there's a set of inputs, and then there's a transformation into a operational space. So there's data that comes in, and then there are things you can do with that data. And the broader that is, the broader that potential of experiences is, or operational, the operational potential, the more intelligent you are. And this really ties into Sergey Levin's Robinson Crusoe robot. This ties into even self-driving, Tesla self-driving, because it just means, look, can we abstract from the input to an previously unseen problem? And if you can do that, then we have intelligence, and then we have artificial general intelligence. He adds a few other caveats to that, in particular information efficiency. So you want to also be able to extract, potential solutions to problems from very little input data. This is another email podcast. It's August 21st, 2024. This is Krim Delco. Since the last update, we're up 1.4%. The market is up 20 basis points. For the year, we are up 13%. The market is up 17.1%. We're underperforming by 4.1%. Artificial general intelligence is a problem worth solving. And this is new. This is something that I've been talking about in the past as a bad problem because it wasn't well defined, and I think I was wrong. I was misunderstanding, and in a sense, it's really a part of the conversation here. In Francois' paper, actually, he talks about the priors, the importance of priors, which means that anything we come up with, any kind of fact, any kind of thought, always starts with the assumptions that we make. And I made a wrong assumption. I thought that AGI in the community means an all-encompassing superintelligence, like a kind of a Mr. Spock meets Hall meets, ChatGPT meets FSD meets everything. And that's not true. AGI actually, in Francois' pretty narrow definition, it just means, look, first it's relatable to human tasks. So we're not talking about a robot that can, transfer multiverses or something like that, which could be part of some sort of broader AGI, right? You could say AGI should be anything that is permissible under the laws of physics. And he says, no, I mean, we're not going to go there because we just want to focus on human relatable tasks, because that's what we can measure, right? So that's I think very important. But more importantly, let's get back to the definition. The definition is simply you have input data and then you have an operational space as an output. And if the operational space is O and the input is P, then O over P wants to be maximized. And G, which is general artificial intelligence, argmax G would be the most optimal. G is the one that maximizes O over P. So we want to have as much operational space as possible with as little as necessary data. Now, there's of course already lots and lots of questions here. For example, the whole chinchilla space where we can say, well, okay, maybe at a certain amount of data, the model can solve this many problems, but if we scale it many times, it can sort of non-linearly increase the potential. So it's kind of even harder to even assess what is this optimal space. But let's not go there. Let's just stay with the more conceptual ideas here, and not get boggled down with engineering problems and actual practical problems. I think what Francois talks about is really a couple of things. Let's start with the priors. So the priors are what we actually, when we see something, we always have a theory. Observations are theory law, and this is David Deutsch. And observations or priors are they're innate to us. So when we see something, when we interpret something, we have assumptions about that something. This is Gödel. This is actually another way to even discuss Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Like, we can't define a system from within as being absolute true. And this also is in line with Karl Popper and his verisimilitude, because we can never really understand the truth, but we can get closer to it. Now, for our purposes here, for the discussion of artificial general intelligence, it means that we want to be conscious about the priors. What that means in practice is, for example, when Tesla gets inputs, pixel inputs into the car, we want to be conscious in how the car actually interprets those pixels. And for example, under Karpati, they've worked a lot on auto-labeling, which is one way to define the priors. Right? It's like you just say, okay, the car needs to understand what it sees based on a human understanding of what it sees. This is one way to do it. We are, I think, a little bit more advanced these days with unsupervised learning. So the car will learn on its own to classify what it sees and then interpret those things for further processing, right? That's the next step. So that's one thing, is the priors. And then the other thing that Francois talks about is the program synthesis. And this is really where, in my opinion, the rubber meets the road. So think of it this way. Program synthesis is like, imagine you are an intelligence that is primed to take input and then find the most optimal program to apply to solve a certain tasks. And it can do that on its own, unsupervised. That's what artificial general intelligence means in François' language. So it's not just that you have the ability to solve a task, but it's also the ability to find the appropriate program for the appropriate task in the appropriate situation. This is really very close to Robinson Crusoe now, right? Because we're stranded, or the Martian, right? The Martian or Robinson Crusoe. Right? So the robot is left alone on a deserted island that it's never seen before. It has sensors, input sensors, and it has a way to identify the most optimal program for the task at hand. So for example, the robot needs to understand that it must find an energy source. So it has a program that will help it build maybe some sort of solar cell, or maybe it doesn't have the material for that, but it can maybe build a wind turbine that generates electricity and then use that electricity to charge its batteries. The problem with program synthesis, according to François, is it's a vast space. You could, in principle, build a robot that has an infinite amount of programs, or let's say a close to infinite amount. The problem then is, of course, it would take way too long to figure out which program to use at the given tasks. And by the way, François doesn't talk about something that is very dear to my heart, which is the overarching goal, the purpose, which is, if you think about, really, really important for humans, right? Human intelligence is driven by purpose. Humans are a lot more effective when they have a religious fanaticism or something close to it driving them, or by the way, it doesn't have to be religion a la Islam or Judaism. It could be a religion like the Raiders are my team, and I'm gonna put all the effort that I can fathom to support my team, right? There's all kinds of religions here. But there's a purpose, right? We humans have a certain purpose. Survival, reproduction, things like that, and then maybe tribalism. So the robot needs to understand, when it's stranded on the island, it needs to actually understand that it needs to survive, right? And this is a very tricky problem for, I think, AGI developers, because how do you have a system that wants to survive without telling it to survive, right? I mean, how do we know we want to survive? We humans, how do we know we want to survive? And it's not just humans. I mean, if I look at my cat, she is obsessed with safety, right? She clearly has a survival instinct. She's not stupid. She doesn't go out there and gets caught by an eagle. She's very cautious. So she has a survival instinct. And you could argue lots of, fish. When I surf, some fish swims away when I come. Others don't. I mean, it's just an interesting problem. François doesn't talk about that. My point here is that, he kind of mentions it because his presentation is really going towards a solution in the abstract. So he doesn't have a solution. He is not presenting AGI by any means. The purpose of his talk is to inspire people to work in a direction which is to combine deep learning with program synthesis. So in very simple terms, to use the typical loss minimizing, pattern recognition type technologies that deep learning gives us to optimize the program synthesis space. So that's kind of where he's living. And then use that to actually synthesize the program and have a more flexible, more adaptive computer. So to summarize, what I really like about his presentation is, first, there is an attempt on a formal definition of what AGI actually means, and in particular what intelligent means. It's the ability to abstract from as little information as possible and then apply this abstraction to a program search process, find the right program, and then solve the task at hand. Where he doesn't, in my opinion, come clean is in the question of purpose. So I think that's something we need to discuss a little bit deeper, and I've spoken about this in the past. Could we induce things like survival instinct or the survival of the fittest or something like that? Or we need a purpose, right? If we want to have a Robinson Crusoe robot, we need a purpose, and that's going to be it's going to be an interesting task. Well, of course, we could also argue that the purpose is part of the program synthesis, but then we have to be careful that we're not in a sort of closed-end loop here, that the robot just loops around trying to figure out what is the best purpose, and then runs out of battery and dies, right? So we don't want that, right? So we need to have maybe some sort of circuit breaker, like when you run low on battery, your main objective needs to be to recharge that battery, that there is nothing else that matters. It's kind of how humans work, right? We are, Maslow's hierarchy. We're very good at, reading books and poetry and music and philosophy, but when we're hungry, we kind of throw all of that away. So that will be my takeaway here. Again, it's an interesting presentation. The paper is in the show notes. It's a long paper discussing the concept of intelligence, the path from task-driven intelligence towards a more general intelligence, and the attempt to use deep learning and program synthesis to combine those two and build a sort of a Robinson Crusoe type robot that is able to adapt and solve previously unseen problems. Thank you.